So if you own an 06 to 18 Ram 1500 and you're looking for hands down the most affordable and the simplest way to get rid of that factory rake, you're tired of that nosedive, you want to level things out, and more importantly, you want to fit up to 35-inch tires without any clearance issues, then you should be checking out the 2-inch Pro Billet Strut Spacer Kit available from Supreme Suspensions. At around the $80 price point, this is the least expensive lift kit currently available for the Ram 1500 06 to 18 years, and like I just mentioned, it'll easily allow you to fit 33-inch tires lock to lock, and it'll even allow you to fit up to 35-inch tires lock to lock, again without any contact or rubbing whatsoever. Other nice part about this spacer lift is it's a relatively straightforward install compared to a full lift kit. And at around 2 inches, it's gonna keep your suspension geometry relatively in spec, so you don't gotta worry about any premature wear on those suspension components, even if you do take your truck off-road and you put that suspension through a lot of articulation. This is definitely a job that you can get done at home with hand tools. You might need a little bit of knowledge or experience. It'll take you around 2 to 3 hours, but if you've never done something like this before, don't worry, I'm actually gonna walk you guys through the install. I'm gonna give this install a pretty modest 2 out of 3 wrenches on my patented difficulty meter. So again, if you want one of the least expensive front lift kits for the Ram 1500, I'm gonna show you guys exactly what tools you need in just a second, and then we'll get started on the install. All right guys, before we get started, you'll need some standard drive ratchets. You need a 5/16 Allen head socket or Allen key. You'll need a full metric deep socket set from 8mm to 24mm, and you're gonna need a couple of metric and SAE wrenches, including a 15, 17, and 18mm wrench and a 13/16 wrench. You'll need a breaker bar and a pry bar, and optional but helpful tools include some spray lubricant, some bungee cord, an impact swivel, some channel locks, some pliers, a hammer, some Loctite, and an impact gun. All right, first we're gonna disconnect our sway bar end link. That way our lower control arm can drop down and the sway bar is gonna remain where it is. You're gonna need a 16mm deep socket for this nut. All right, next we're gonna disconnect our tie rod end link here. You're gonna need a 21mm socket for this guy. All right, once you've pulled that nut, you want to smack the boss on the knuckle right here to loosen the joint. You want to be careful, you don't want to hit your rotor. All right, to make it a little bit easier, we are going to be moving the knuckle around a lot, so we're going to pop the caliper off. You're going to need a 13mm socket to pull the 2 bolts holding it on together. It's helpful to have some vice grips. You actually have to hold this little nut right here, otherwise they'll spin together. All right, now that those 2 bolts are pulled, we're gonna go ahead and pry the caliper off with a pry bar. We're gonna hang it up out of the way with a bungee cord. All right, before we pop the ball joint, we want to keep the lower control arm generally in its place. That's going to keep tension off of the bottom strut bolt and nut. So we're going to pop that strut bolt and nut first. You're going to need a 24mm socket for the nut itself, and you want to hold the head of the bolt with a 21mm socket or a wrench. All right, now we're gonna pop this little wire here. It's a Christmas tree fitting, so just gently release it with your hands. Then we're gonna pop our ball joint. You're gonna need a 21mm deep socket for this. And if you're using an impact gun, it's helpful to have a swivel. All right, once you got that nut removed, it's the same deal. Go ahead and smack the top of the knuckle right there, and that should free it. All right, now we're gonna finally release our strut. There are 3 nuts holding it to the top here. You're gonna need a 15mm wrench. It's helpful to have a ratcheting wrench. It is a tight fit if you try and get a socket in there. All right guys, so we got to the fun part. Now I want to stress you got to take your time and be careful with this. Basically what we're going to do next is we're actually going to get enough leverage on the lower control arm so that we can clear it. We want to get the tongues out of here on the strut itself. There are a couple ways to do this. Basically, the easiest way if you're doing it by yourself is to have a big old pry bar like me, get some leverage inside the hole in the lower control arm and press down on it. Now, I'm actually going to use all of my weight in order to push it down because the rubber bushings have a lot of tension on them. Again, make sure your truck is really secure on your lift or your jack stands before you do this. All right, with our strut removed, we can throw our spacer in place and we're gonna tighten it down with all the hardware. You're gonna need the flat washers, crush washers, and nuts in the kit. And you're gonna need a 17mm deep socket to tighten everything down. Now, it's also helpful to have some Loctite. Wanna make sure these things stay on nice and tight. You don't want them coming loose at all. Otherwise, you could have some vibration in your drive line and you definitely don't wanna pull this stuff off again. All right, with our spacer installed, we're gonna put the strut back in the same exact way we pulled it out with our big old pry bar. And make sure when you throw the strut in there, because of that added space, you wanna line up the studs with the holes where the strut's gonna actually sit. That way the tongues can clear the lower control arm. All right, with our strut in place, you can sit on that pry bar again, or if you have a friend helping you, push it down. Line up the strut with the hole there, and that bolt should slide in just fine. You might need to give it a little bit of motivation with your hammer. All right, now we're gonna put the nut back on this bolt here. You might have noticed I put the bolt in the opposite direction. The only reason I did that is because it's a little bit easier and it doesn't affect functionality whatsoever. Just wanna make sure you torque it down good, just the way it came off. So again, you're gonna need your 21 and 24mm sockets for this. All right, now that our strut bolt and nut are in place, we're gonna get our ball joint back into the knuckle itself before we secure everything else. It's helpful to have a floor jack. You can put that underneath the lower control arm, crank it up just a little bit, make sure the truck does not come off your jack stands or your lift. That should give you just enough, and then you're gonna push down on the upper control arm with that big old pry bar, get the stud through the boss, and then you can tighten that nut back on. All right, once you got that nut in place, you can remove your pry bar, grab your 21mm deep with your swivel like me. Go ahead and tighten that down. All right, now that our knuckle's secure, we're gonna install our tie rod end, and again, you're gonna need a 21mm deep socket for the stud. All right, next we're gonna do our sway bar end here. Go ahead and put that rubber piece on with the little top hat there and secure that nut. All right, you're gonna need your 16mm deep socket to tighten this guy down. All right, guys, we're almost done here. We're gonna go ahead and throw our caliper back in place. We're gonna reuse those 13mm bolts that we removed earlier. So if you hadn't guessed, you're gonna need your 13mm socket, and it's also helpful to have those vice grips like I used previously. All right, guys, last step is throwing those nuts on top of the strut there. You'll need that 15mm ratcheting wrench in order to tighten these guys down. All right, so once you got everything buttoned up, you can take your truck off those jacks or the lift, and that should wrap up the install. And that also wraps up my review of Supreme Suspension's 2-inch Pro Billet front strut spacer kit fitting your 06 to 18 Ram 1500. I'm Travis, thanks for watching, and for all things Ram, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.